Okay, so here's what they're going into, and this is, let's just find a longer bit. This is basically boot high chicory, cocksfoot, clover, and sainfoin. There's a few other legumes in there as well. Moderately dense, could be denser. They've just been released onto it just this second. So let me just start by saying that this is, in my belief, slightly overgrazed. They've just come into this new field. So this first paddock, I've got the amount slightly wrong. The grass is slightly thinner than I thought, so come the morning there's a bit too little of it. But it's not too bad, and because it's dry they haven't broken the ground at all. And there's quite a bit of trampling. You can see some shit nicely mixed in, and these little clovers still have their heads on enough to get going with the photosynthesis. I can see a blade of grass, so a lot of this will stand up again and get going, and that which doesn't is nicely trampled and stuck to the deck. This is the sort of shit slick area that you get in front of the fence. You can see it's where they've been walking up and down. They've smeared it. Let's just get the fence line to give some context. There's the fence line, and they've walked up and down in front of it a few times when I arrived and shat a bit, and that's resulted in these big smears of grass and shit. So here's one end of the spectrum. This is, I would say, rather undergrazed. So you can see there's quite a lot of actual tall leafy material left that's actually standing. And if this was all trampled down, that would be fine. And if it was, more of it was eaten, that would be okay as well. But there's a little bit too much stood up in the air really. And this was sort of semi-deliberate. This was because they needed some water, and this was just a temporary paddock and the day turned hot, so I had to sort of move them. And also because this end of the field, this is the sort of far end of the field, has had some damage in the past in the wet and has been overgrazed a few times, so I'm leaving a bit on it so it can have a good spring feed. So I think this is about right for a sort of late skim, because they've impacted the chicory quite a lot. As you can see, they've nibbled it down quite nicely, taken the top out, which is the bit that's going to grow up tall and woody. It'd be a problem if we wanted to hay or silage this, so try and knock that back early with the stock. And yet, if we get down in there, we can see little clover leaves and stuff still visible, ready to go again. And it takes quite some digging to actually reach the soil. There's the soil. And obviously it would be wet because it's been raining, but it's really greasy down there. And it's been it's been dry yesterday, and areas which have been skinned out at the edges where there is actual bare soil, the nutrient bits they always go for, nutritious bits, you can see that's already dry on top, so we know this mulch is doing a nice job. We've got some nice wilted material here. We've got some properly trampled stuff going on. And also they've smashed up the material that was standing from last year, this woody stuff. So that's now gradually getting trashed on the surface and starting to cycle. So here's the inevitable skinned area down the edge of the field, and there's a lot less chicory in here because there was like a headland around the edge where there's no chicory, and that's allowed a lot more smaller grass species to grow, and there's a lot of nutrients coming out of the hedge probably from all the mycorrhiza and activity of breakdown of the leaf litter. And also because the buffalo tend to come in under the trees where possible, they shit here a lot, and so you get this sort of nutrient build up. That's why you can see a clump of stingers up there. You wouldn't get that out in the middle of the field, it's just too poor. So you tend to get this drift of nutrients that gets stuck to the hedgerows. Again, the answer is greater density, so that they have to graze the whole thing evenly. But also you just have to tolerate this to a certain extent, and it looks bad. There's this path they've created running down here, and also I've been up and down here with the Manitou, and that's caused quite a bit of damage. But these field boundaries are incredibly resilient, and this will bounce back amazingly well despite the panning. There's this classic trough damage. This is where the trough has been for 24 hours or so. As you can see, they've just basically annihilated it with their hooves. And right down next to the trough, we've basically just got bare earth with some grass trampled into it. And so long as they're not on this too long, and you don't do it in the same place 2 years in a row, this will recover surprisingly fast. And of course I've overseeded this. This was done in the wet, so it's had a nice overseed, got properly trampled in. And you can see, as we scan up there is a thin line that carries on up there, so this is definitely, the damage is aided by wet conditions, not just the presence of the trough. This is by way of being a bit of a disaster. You can see we've got this big paddock corner has been completely poached and destroyed in the wet. And this is what happens when you don't seek accurate weather forecasting. You don't realise it's going to suddenly piss down all night. And it's not that the rest of the paddock is overgrazed, it's just simply where they've made their sleeping patch in the corner, and they've been here all night and the hoof pressure has just destroyed it. So this is not about allowing them to overgraze it. This is simply about allowing them to be in one place too long in the wet. So if I'd come down here absolutely at dusk and given them another patch, then they would have made a small sleeping area here, which would have been a bit trampled, and then they would have made another one right up there, and that would have sort of halved the pressure. But we knew we were taking a risk bringing them into this sort of quite easily damageable field when there was a chance of rain, and unfortunately this is what can happen. So it's good to have some fields you're less concerned about, maybe ones which you're going to cultivate for silage or to get some cereal rotations going, and maybe you could use those for wet conditions, and that would really help. Of course I've overseeded it, but now it's set like concrete, so we'll have to see how that goes. So this is a field that's been grazed about 5 or 6 days ago, I think, and as you can see the recovery is quite impressive, with the grasses already standing up, all the chicories got what leaves they've got standing, clovers are upright, and it's all starting to put on bulk for us again.